Okay, take 17. Not really, but I have tried a few times. There's something I wanted to write a post about, but it's such a complicated issue that I don't know how to write it succinctly in a short enough space that people will actually want to read it. So I thought, well, maybe if I could just do a video, maybe I can try to sum it up in a few minutes in a way that will make sense to people. What I want to talk about is transgender. And why I want to talk about it is because things have been moving so quickly and so socially, so rapidly, that I worry that we've put the cart before the horse a little bit in the sense that I don't know that the public education and public awareness of this issue is where it should be, given how far we've come in terms of civil rights and that kind of thing. So, and also, it reminds me of my own coming out process because you spend a long time working yourself up to it, doing reading, reflecting, thinking, trying to understand and wrap your head around it before you finally reach the point where you understand it, you accept it, and you decide to share it with other people. And there can be a tendency to get impatient when other people don't immediately get it. And we call it a coming out process for a reason. It is a process. It takes time. And we have to understand that people who don't already have this understanding and this awareness need time to process it. And I think that there's the possibility that we've not been making this any easier on people, and I say we, being the GLBTQI plus whatever community, because the terminology is not consistent. We've come up with 100 different words for everything. So I just wanted to hopefully talk for a few minutes about this in a way that might bring a little bit of extra awareness or understanding if you find yourself confused by this issue. And it is complicated. My own background, I was professionally gay for many years. I used to work in the gay community. Spent a lot of time working with, supporting transgender people over the years, over the decades, really. I don't put myself forward as an expert by any means, and I don't understand all of this as well as I might. But I do have a perspective on this that comes out of my own experience that I wanted to share. So, when I said that we haven't made things easier by not being consistent in our terminology, that comes from this community being defiantly and determinedly individualistic. And people really want to construct their own identities and their own personalities, and they want to come up with their own names for it. And what was it? One of the social media networks came up with 50 odd, or was it 15 different gender options you could pick. And others would tell you, well, that's not nearly enough. So I understand why people feel that way, but I do think it makes it more difficult for others to understand because we need to settle on some common terminology and agree what it means. Because I was just doing a little bit of thinking earlier about what sort of words are we using here, and I came up with such a list. I'm just going to fire these out really quick. Trans, non-binary, gender fluid, androgynous, bigender, cisgender, transvestite, crossdresser, gender dysmorphia, gender nonconforming, gender queer, third gender, gender variant, intersex. And that's not all of them. I mean, that's just a sample. So, first off, I want to be really clear about something. If you don't know, trans is an actual thing. It's not a political construction. Transgendered people are inspired, or that's not the right word. Transgender people are reacting to and responding to a biological situation. The science on this is still young, but what we do know is that male and female brains, as similar as they are, do have some structural differences. And early indications are that for many trans people, when they examine their brains, they find that their brains are biologically female. Sorry, I'm talking about transgendered women. So someone who is biologically born male would have a brain structurally resembles a female, which can kind of explain or give some understanding as to why that person feels that something is not right. That they look in the mirror and see themselves dressed as a man, looking like a man, and thinking, that doesn't match what's going on in my head. That is different. And some people would take offense at this, but I think it's helpful to understand the distinction between biological and psychological. Because for a lot of people who use terms like gender fluid and non-binary, what they're talking about is a desire not to conform to society's expectations of them as a man or woman. So they want to construct something that is uniquely them. It doesn't necessarily pick all of the treats out of the one bag. They can pick some out of this one, pick some out of that one, and make up their own identity. Fair enough, fine, but that is a different thing than being a transgender person. So the other thing that's true medically of people who are transgendered is that many of them have been diagnosed with something called gender dysmorphia, which is a name for a diagnosis for that sense that something is not right in my body. I've got a biological gender that looks one way, but psychologically, mentally, my brain is not matching my body. And if you, there's some really great YouTube vloggers who address this issue, some trans people themselves who talked about how difficult that is, how painful it is to go through life with that disconnect between your body and your head. For those of us who haven't experienced it, it's probably impossible to understand. I don't really claim to understand it myself, but I have it on good authority that it is an extraordinarily painful situation to live through. So there is a biological basis for trans, and then there is a psychological basis for a lot of the other stuff that we hear that gets mixed up with it. So your gender queers, your gender fluids, your gender non-binary people, they are being individuals. They are doing their own thing. They are constructing their own identity, and more power to them. That's wonderful. But it is a separate issue. So try to remember that trans people are people who are adjusting to a biological situation that has put them in great distress often, not every time. And that, from my own experience of knowing and working with and supporting a number of transgendered people, that their life experiences, their day-to-day life, particularly once they have decided to try to be authentic to their gender identity and to transition into how they feel inside so that their body that matches their sense of self, go through tremendous hostility. And I can only speak to the two countries I've lived in, but even down to the point where they are not seen as employable, cannot get a job. So many trans people end up doing sex work because the options for having any income at all are so limited. And even when you do find someone who's willing to hire you, I mean, the abuse that trans people receive every day it can be just devastating. My sense of the people that I have known and that I have met is that they are a group of some of the most courageous, brave, admirable people I've ever met, because their authenticity of who they are is so important to them that they're prepared to take everything that society has thrown at them, and we have thrown a lot. So I have all the time in the world for trans people, and I have time for the gender fluid and the gender non-binary people too, but that is a slightly different issue. Part of the same family, part of the same community, but a different phenomenon. There's so much more I could talk about on this, but I just wanted to emphasize that if you understand that people who are transgendered are trying to adjust to a mental schism, a mental disconnect between their brain and body, and are doing their best to try to live true to themselves and to be an ally to them, because so many people aren't. And so many people don't understand, sometimes for understandable reasons. Some people are still going through this process of understanding what it is. But I just want to be somebody who's raising their voice saying, yes, this is a real thing. These are real people who have real feelings, and they have gone through hell, many of them, in their lives. So the next time you see a trans person, I hope that your heart goes out to them and that you reach out to them. Be a friend. Be kind. Thank you.